Hello and welcome back to another Strat Gaming video guide. In today's video, we're going to be looking at character creation and leveling in its entirety. By the end of the video, you will have a complete understanding of how character levels work and how to plan and execute the perfect character based on the objectives and goals for your specific playthrough. I put timestamps in the description for your convenience. This is such an important topic and I'm really excited to cover it, so let's jump in. Before we get into how to make a great character, it helps to know exactly how the leveling system works for the main level of our character and companions, so that we can be more diligent with attribute and focus point placement. We start out with a fresh character at level 1. When we gain XP for any skill, we get an equal amount of base XP towards our character's level. To clarify this, base XP is the amount of XP an action would give you if you had a learning rate of 1. For example, if we smelt 1 unit of hardwood, we will gain 15 base XP. If our smithing learning rate is 10x, then we would gain 150 XP for smithing, but our main character level would still gain 15 XP. These two XP amounts are awarded separately, so no matter what learning rate you have, your main character will always get the same base XP. If you reach the level cap at 330 for smithing, you will no longer gain XP for smithing, but you will still gain XP for your main character's level for each smithing action. This is important to keep in mind, as even when your level progression in a skill slows to a crawl or stops, it's still important because it contributes to your main character. Once we gain enough base XP, our character's level will increase by 1. Every level increase will give +1 focus point, and every 4 levels will give +1 attribute point for us to assign. Each time we level up, the following level requires more XP than the previous. I've tested how much XP is required for each level up to level 40, and here are the results. A couple interesting things to point out here. Early levels are easy to gain since the XP required is so low, even though the percent increase from the previous level is so high. As we get into the teens, the percent increase for the next level narrows to about 20%. To understand how difficult leveling to higher levels is, we must consult Einstein. Compound interest is the 8th wonder of the world. While we aren't paying money interest, we do pay an XP interest to get to the next level. Every 4 levels, we must earn more than double the XP. We need 72,000 XP at level 15, but over 154,000 at level 19, which is more than double. There is no actual level cap in the game, but because of the steep increase with each level, there are practical limits. We will cover this in more detail later in the video. Let's now look at some of the best ways to level up our main character. Since we are exclusively looking at base XP, we must find the activities that give the most XP in the shortest amount of time. Thankfully, we have the Ultimate Guide to Bannerlord series to reference for all skills base XP in the game. If we went over all skills, this guide would be an hour long, so instead let's just look at the top 3. Smithing. With the right weapon parts, you can gain up to 5,000 XP for a single weapon and be able to craft 10 weapons or more per day. Hands down, this is the easiest high XP gain skill in the game. Riding. When we are mounted and using a bow or crossbow, we can get between 2,000 and 3,000 XP per shot if you're 100 meters or further away. It's not unreasonable to gain tens of thousands of XP each day using this method. Steward. While it's not the fastest, Steward is the easiest and most passive XP in the game. The concept is simple. Have max party size and all 9 different foods in your inventory and watch your levels skyrocket. With 300 troops and all 9 foods, we will gain 3,500 XP each day. One thing to remember, you earn XP for each of these regardless of your learning rate. If your character has no points into Steward, you can still gain XP for your main level by keeping high troop count and 9 foods. How you build your character is completely subjective. Maybe you want to make a smithy who rides on horseback with high bow skill. Maybe you're considering a bandit playthrough, so you max roguery and scouting. What's best for you will depend on what you're trying to achieve, because there's no perfect build. However, the process we use to build our character is critical. If you haphazardly pick perks and allocate focus points based on your mood at the time, then you'll end up like me in my early days, stuck 30 hours into a playthrough with a character that just plain sucks. Like all great plans, we start with the end up front and work our way backwards. There are infinite possibilities for how we can build a character, so I'm going to use a character I'm making for my upcoming playthrough, the World Conquest speedrun. In order to achieve this goal, here is a list of what I need to be able to do. Have an impact on the battlefield through both melee and ranged, have mobility on foot and horse, reach the 30s for our main character level quickly, have the largest party size possible, have the most parties for our personal army, and keep nobles off the battlefield after being captured. Next, let's look at the possible starts and game settings we can pick from that will influence our decisions. Campaign or Sandbox mode. If we go the campaign route, we start with extra family members for more companions, 6 attribute points, and 12 focus points at age 22. If we go the Sandbox route, our options open up significantly. Looking at the chart, we can choose 4 different ages with more or less points to assign. Starting at 20 gives us the same stats as the campaign, but but going up to 50 years old gives us 9 attribute points and 18 focus points to start. If you're planning on playing with death enabled, I don't recommend a 50-year-old start, as the odds of you dying in the first 5 to 10 years is really high. However, if you disable death, go for 50 years old 100% of the time and pick up those extra points. This is especially great for newer players or those who just want to try a ton of different perk combinations. For my playthrough, I'm going to play without death and start at age 50. By the time I reach the end game, I expect to be at level 32 or higher, which means I'll have accumulated 32 more focus points and 8 more attribute points. If we add back in the starting points, we get a total of 17 attribute and 50 focus points. By going through this exercise, we can now look through all the perks in the game and determine which will help us achieve our goal, and know with 100% accuracy that we will be able to level up high enough to get it. Now for the fun part, perk selection. I love building my character out. It's the same feeling I got when I was younger, waiting for Christmas morning to come up so I can unwrap presents. There are nearly 700 perks in the game, so going one by one and picking and choosing would be awful. So I cataloged each one into a searchable database. Check the description for directions on how to get access to this. Let's look at how I use this hero builder to make all of my characters. I always start with the no-brainers, perks that give attribute points. I add a filter for benefit type and select attribute gain. This will pull up all perks in Bannerlord that give an attribute point. Level 175 athletics perk Healthy Citizen is the first, so we click the checkbox on the left to signify we want to keep it. Next, we have both perks at level 200 athletics, one giving control and one giving vigor. We can't have them both, so we have to make a choice, which in this case is vigor. Again, click the checkbox and move on to the next. Smithing 150, we have another choice, and again we will go with vigor. I prefer faster swings to more bow damage, but either would be a good pick. And finally, level 225, we pick up another endurance attribute. By adding these 4 perks, we take our total attribute points from 17 up to 21. Incredible. Now let's go down the list of goals and find perks that will help us achieve them. Combat perks aren't critical for me, so to save time we will skip them. Mobility, both on campaign map and in battle, is very important to me, so let's look at each. Let's start with campaign movement speed. We adjust our filter by replacing attribute gain to campaign movement speed and see what perks come up. We will pick up level 75 riding perk Mounted Infantry, level 100 riding Sweeping Winds, level 200 athletics strong, and going all the way down picking up the ones that are important. Next, let's look at combat movement speed on foot. Switching the filter once again to movement speed increase, we get a list of all perks in the game that change our movement speed in battle. Notice here we start to see some captain perks, which are good but not what we're looking for. We can easily add a filter to block them out. Click on the filter button, add filter, change the benefit type category over to applies to, then click the middle button contains and change it to does not contain, and finally in the third box select the tag captain. Now we have a list of only perks that pertain to use personally or the party leader. We pick up 5 more perks from this list and move on to the next. This video would turn into an hour or more if we went over everything, so let's do one more group of perks and then move on to the implementation section. We want to have the largest party size possible, so let's check all perks that increase party size. There are a ton of perks here. Picking almost all of them brings the total to 8 perks. Without counting the final perk for leadership, we increase our party size by 45, and with the final perk at level 300 leadership, we can add an extra 50 more troops. Now that we know how many attribute and focus points we have and which perks we will be using, we need to plan out what points go where. The easiest way to do this is to go to our list of selection perks and find the highest level perk for each skill category. We remove all filters except for one, change the first box to our checkbox for selected perks, and make sure the other 2 fields are is and checked off. The perks are listed in order of skill and perk level, making our task easy. First up, two-handed. We will be going up to at least level 200. Next, bring up the chart we used earlier to find out what attribute and focus point combinations to use to achieve this. We can see that it's possible to get level 200 with at least 2 focus points and 10 attribute points, or 5 focus points and 1 attribute point. Looking at the total attribute points and focus points we have to play with, it's easy to see we have more focus points than attribute points to use. It's always wise to use your attribute points in categories that we plan on leveling up multiple skills in, making sure we don't waste efficiency. This is because each attribute point we we use raises the level cap in all 3 categories, where focus points only change 1 category. So putting attribute points into two-handed would be a total waste. Hence, we will put 5 focus points, leaving us with 45 more to use. We use the same logic with bow, putting 5 more focus points there and taking our total down to 40. Now for endurance. We have perks in all 3 skills in this category, with the highest one being 225. Since we can utilize attributes efficiently here, we will go with 9 attribute points into endurance and 3 focus points into each group. Remember earlier, we picked up 2 perks that give us +1 endurance each, which means we only need to have 7 total. We start the game with 2 attribute points into each category, so we only need to put 5 more into endurance. After picking these, we have 16 attribute points left and 31 focus points. We can do the same for social, which will bring our total attribute count down to 8 left and focus points to 21. When we get to the end and have a bunch of points left, we can either save them as flex points, giving us the option to allocate them later in the game based on what we need at that time, or we can search each attribute or skill tree and start picking until we use them all up. My preference is to pick up only the necessary ones, saving the rest for later. We never know what our game will be like, so having the flexibility is nice. I like to use a cheat sheet that I have on me while I'm playing, which says exactly how many attribute points and focus points go into each category. You can easily write down on a paper or use a notepad, spreadsheet, or whatever. I highly recommend having it handy for when you level up, taking all the thinking out of the process, which will allow you to focus on what needs to happen next. All that's left is to start a new sandbox game and pick the options that fall within our guidelines. For this playthrough, I will be using the Empire culture. You'll have to watch the series yourself to see why I didn't go with Battania. Our first pick for family gives us an attribute into social and a focus point for charm and trading each. For early childhood, we pick up another point in social and charm and our first point into leadership. Adolescence, we gain our first endurance and riding point as well as 1 for steward. Youth gives us our first point into bow and the second point into endurance and riding. Young adult is a tricky pick. This is the only section that can award us with personality traits, which will be extremely important if we want to hire clans into our kingdom. One option gives 3 traits, but it puts a second point into steward, which we didn't originally plan on taking. We have enough flex points that it's not a big deal. The traits are really good to have, so we go with you treated people well, giving us a 5th point into social, 3rd into charm, and 2nd into steward. And as discussed before, we will take 50 years old for the age and turn death off so we can enjoy all those lovely bonus attribute and focus points. The world will be ours in a matter of time. If you're interested in watching the World Conquest, be sure to stay tuned as I will be releasing at least 1 episode per week. They will be highly edited, taking about a year of in-game time down to about 10 to 15 minutes of video showing only high-level decisions, highlights, and key battles. Thank you so much for watching another Strat Gaming video guide. If you found anything in this video useful or entertaining and want to help the channel out, hit that like button to get the YouTube algorithm working for us. If you want to see more Bannerlord content and guides, consider subscribing. Thank you again, and I'll see you
on the battlefield.